All right, well, welcome to Empowering Educators. This is episode 2, titled Relationships, the Foundation of Coaching. And we're coming to you from the Hill Country in Texas, Bernie High School. And I'm Chad Anderson. This is my 3rd year at Bernie High School as an instructional coach.
Hey guys, I'm Casey Forks. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you saw our podcast last week or 2 weeks ago, you've noticed that we've kind of revamped a little. So we definitely want to send a shout out to the people who helped us do that, Mr. Yoder, Miss Davis, and Miss Seaman for lending us their glue guns, without which this would never have happened. So thank you guys very much.
So we wanted to take some time just to kind of talk for a few minutes about the importance of building relationships with our teachers. And we ask our teachers to do that with their students, and we see the impact that that has on their learning. So we believe that it is the foundation in coaching, and we're referring to Jim Knight again as our research behind this. And he basically has partnership principles that we try to abide by when we're coaching our teachers. And those, just very quickly, are equality, voice, reflection, reciprocity, choice, praxis, and dialogue. And the main idea behind all that is that we truly believe the teachers are the experts in the classroom, and so we're just a partnership with them. So building that reciprocity, that I'm learning as well. Like the lesson the teacher is doing is like a research lesson, and we're trying to see how the students are improving. And really, when it comes down to choice, when it comes down to voice, the teacher has the last say, because it's their classroom, it's their students, they're ultimately the ones that are going to implement the instruction. So that's very important, that they feel empowered with us partnering with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Chad said, truly building relationships with teachers is the foundation of being an instructional coach. It's just like it is with teachers in the classroom when you're building that relationship with your students. If there's not trust, if there's not a working partnership and a belief that you can be beneficial to each other, really, you can't move forward with it. And it's challenging, when you just start out in a coaching role, if because there are lots of challenges. Sometimes you move into a coaching role at a school where you taught, and so then there's a shift. You may know everyone, but then there's a shift in that. Or you go into a coaching role at a school where you don't know anyone, and so you have to build those relationships, and it's that's the fun part, also, but it can be challenging, Everyone coaches a little differently, their style's a little different, and how they go about building those relationships is different. But that's the fun part.
Yeah, and I think another point to add is that we're not fixers. And I know a lot of teachers, when it comes to evaluations, like whether it's through the administration, they're just conditioned that it's an I got you. Mm-hmm. And so one thing that we really focus on is we meet with the teacher ahead of time and we ask, what is it you want me to look for? And then when I go in, that's all that I look for. Mm-hmm. And so I don't look for anything else. And that goes back to that equality, that reciprocity. We're learning together and partnering together. But we're by no means the fixers in education, because really we want to advocate the excellence that our teachers are doing. Yeah. And by partnering along with them, we're able to showcase that for them. And so then we're able to highlight them, which is extremely exciting.
It is.
Process.
Very much so. Today we have a special guest. This is Miss Lexi Harms. So thank you for being with us, Lexi.
Thanks for having me.
You want to tell us a little bit about your background and how long you've been teaching and what you teach?
Yeah. So I am an English teacher at Bernie High School and also the assistant girls soccer coach.
Very nice.
This will be my 5th year at Bernie High School and in education.
Very nice.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're going to kind of shift now. We're still talking about relationships, but shifting to you as a teacher and with your students in the classroom. So how do you try to build relationships with students in your classroom?
Yeah, I also just kind of want to have a small sidebar about just because I've known Chad for 3 years now.
Yeah.
And when he came in, we kind of had instructional coaches come onto the campus for the first time. So I know that like with some teachers, it was a little bit, are they about to tell us how to do our job?
Right.
Is it another person who's going to try and do that? When Chad came in, I was still in the early stages of becoming an educator. So I kind of, everything that he was offering, I was, please help.
Soaking it up.
Soaking it up.
Yeah.
And so that first year that he was here, we worked together a lot. And I think I was your first instructional coaching cycle.
That's right, yep.
And so I was doing English 2 at the time, working with sophomores, and so we worked towards STAR, and it was a lot for English teachers, specifically within that realm. And just continuously throughout the whole year, it was, here's things that could help, you could use, and then if I said, hey, I don't think this would really work with my classroom, he was like, trash can. And then we just moved forward. It was never I can't believe you don't want to use what I'm giving you. I can't believe, and so it was always really beneficial to me. And I felt like that year was the first year that I got to figure out my style of teaching and how I go about my classroom and what I know works for my kids and what absolutely doesn't. And so it was always a partnership and almost a conversation instead of, this is how you should be doing things, which as a coach myself, I know is more beneficial, just because like you mentioned earlier, like we have a lot of people who come into our classroom, see it for a little bit, and then it's, well, here's how you should be doing X, Y, Z, which might happen the 10 minutes after you leave, and so instructional coaching, I feel, is often more beneficial the more you dive in, right? Like the more that as an educator you pour into it, the more you get out of it.
Right.
And so I've seen that with my classroom over the last 3 years and beyond. And then I just feel like it's really important to allow yourself, because y'all never came in and told me how to do my job. It was instead, hey, how can I help? How can I boost? How can I encourage? Which are things that are in coaching often, because I also found that whenever he came in and saw what we had planned together, it was also tying back in like encouragement of, hey, you can't be the eyes and ears in this back corner for the entire hour and a half that you're teaching this. But when I was back there, when I was rotating around the room while you were, like, these are things that I heard that were really awesome to hear, that kids were doing well, or how this student does this thing in your classroom that I don't see them do in another classroom. So it's really nice to have another set of eyes, because you're only one person. And when you have 32 kids, if you met with them for only a minute each class, like that's maybe 3 times, stuff like that. So it's just nice to know that you have that extra support instead of just feeling like, I never felt like it was evaluative, like ever.
Well, that's good. So I know, like, when I first came in to observe you, that's the first thing I noticed was your relationship with the students and how they would respond. And I mean, there were some squirrely students in there, but they responded to your redirection. And so I know now you have a group that you've had now for 3 years maybe in a row. So can you talk a little bit about the impact of that with your instruction now as the seniors?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a balance, because with teaching AP literature, I've had those seniors for potentially 3 years. And I've developed those relationships because also the longer that you stay at a school, period, it's not, you have to move up with them. But I think just staying in one place where kids start to recognize you and they know from their other fellow classmates and stuff, hey, this is what Mrs. Harms does in her class. This is how you get through it, sort of thing. And building that relationship there. But also having on-level sophomores who I've never had them before has been a really interesting dichotomy for this year, just because you can almost like feel the difference as an educator, right? Where sophomores are sophomores, so kind of the first, I would say, semester, you're kind of doing the boundary setting, this is who I am, this is the stuff I don't budge on, really want to get to know you, really want to know what's going on in your life, really want to help you become a better person, and then teach you a little bit of English along the way. But we have to set those boundaries early so that later they know, because I say all the time that I feel like kids aren't trying to overstep your boundaries, they're just trying to see where they are. Right. So they'll push on them until you're like, I push back. And then it's kind of like, oh, yes ma'am, okay, that's where that is, cool. Because they're not, granted, you'll have some kids who really just want to overstep boundaries. But I feel like over the last 5 years, it's been a continuous like, wow, they're really pushing on this, but then when I push back, it almost kind of goes away. Or they kind of understand that that's how that is. So they work within those. And so with my AP Lit kids, it's more, I know things about their lives. Right. So being able to connect that to their writing, to, hey, we're reading this book and it's introducing this theme. I remember you talking about this last year. How could that connect, right? So relationships, I think also in English are very almost natural because I read their essays. And so I get to see windows into them as individuals.
Those vulnerable pieces of them. Right.
And so that relationship building, I think it's also one of those things that you need to follow up on. Like if a kid grants you this window, and I know that it's hard as an educator because we have 800,000 things that we need to do within a day. And so stopping and taking a moment to interact with a piece of their writing and saying like, hey, like this essay that you gave me was really insightful and that's a really cool experience and you're a very strong individual, right? And then just kind of like moving on. And last year, actually one of my coworkers, Bridget Rohde, came up with the idea of Post-it notes, where it's just, hey, if I read an essay and it says something, and I have ADD, so my brain goes everywhere all the time. So literally as I'm reading these essays and I see a window, I'll write a little Post-it note, and then I know I have to give that to that person, and then I'll literally just walk by and put it on their desk and keep walking, and they have that little insight into, hey, I not only read it, but I see you, and I would love to interact with you, but I have an hour and a half with 32 students. So,
and that's huge. I think just the Post-it note especially, because then that's something they keep, right? And they keep those Post-it notes and they have those somewhere, and that's something they can always look back on and think, oh, Miss Harms gave me this. She really saw me for this, you know, and that's super cool.
So what types of things, so you've had your students now for about 6 weeks.
Right.
So what types of things are you noticing that they might need a little more support skill-wise or whatever it is you're noticing?
Right. I think specifically with my AP Lit kids, because having some of them in Lang, but majority of them who are coming into AP Lit are coming from AP Lang. They've already kind of established this is how the structure of an essay should look.
Right.
It's just changing that from rhetorical to literary. And so I found that with their essay writing as of right now, which like you said, we're only 6 weeks in, it almost feels like with the commentary piece that's in their writing, we need to go a little bit deeper than surface level. Just because a lot of them, they know how to apply evidence and say, hey, this is where it's in the text, this is what's being used, this is the literary device, I can talk about that. And then essentially their commentary, it almost it's very surface level, and some of them are almost bridging on summary, which is not where we want them to be at all. So I think kind of allowing them different spaces to maybe go a little bit deeper with the commentary piece could be super beneficial.
Have you considered any strategies so far to sort of implement that, or what are you?
Yeah, so last year, one of the strategies that I used that I felt really helped them make a connection between main idea and tying it back to the thesis and understanding that there is an argument that is being made was these note card towers. And essentially what they did is each note card was a different color. So the top was their thesis and had their main ideas, their 3 main ideas up at the top. And then the ones beneath that were evidence and what rhetorical device is being used, and then where in the text is that being used. Okay. And then underneath that was commentary. So it was, okay, now that you've given me the evidence and it's supporting a main idea, right? You should be able to give me a piece of commentary that ties back to the top card, right? So it's building on itself. And they would do 3 note card pillars almost with the main idea on top.
So they're essentially building their essay in that, in those stacks,
and more of like a tangible way than just writing it. Yeah. So I feel like I can tweak that almost with the commentary bottom card and potentially adding like, I don't know what that one underneath it to make them go deeper with it. But maybe asking like the why, how questions of, okay, why did they use that? How did they use it? And having them kind of flesh that out on a note card.
Like what impact did it have on the reader as they're going through, right?
Yeah. So potentially having that last card be like, why, how, what, you know?
What
sort of
thing.
Now, I remember sitting with you and talking about this and that issue, and this is what I love about instructional coaching. Casey and I always say, if we go back in the classroom, we're going to be such better educators because of what we see. And so I had been in an AP World class, and I had seen Jordan Blunt kind of do a similar thing. And I truly believe color resonates with students.
Absolutely.
And so I presented that to you, and so you thought about it, and then you were like, okay, I think this is how I can use it, and you kind of build it a little different. But I was in there when the students were doing this, and there was the from the kids, and I was like, that's what you want as a teacher. This is what this is. So I think if we're noticing some of the similar things, I think then it's just coming up with like maybe specifically we can try to figure out what is it that we want to try to practice with them because this seems like a highly impactful thing.
Well, and I think that also is one of the things that instructional coaching has kind of opened a door to for me is working with other educators. I know that we talk about it all the time and it's like, teachers pay teachers and all that. But even having the conversations of having almost that channel opened up, right? Where, like I mentioned, Bridget Rohde gave me the Post-it note idea, and then I modified that for my classroom. And then you told me about Jordan Blunt and how she had done this thing in AP. And I'm like, well, obviously AP World and AP Lang are different, right? But they still have similar pieces of context. And so it's the opening the door to, hey, like, we're all educators. We all have I can't break through this. Hey, this worked for me. Try this or modify it and do it that way. That really in any other context, she's on a completely different part of the school. So do I want to have conversation? Absolutely. But can I? Not really. So I feel like instructional coaching like really allows that because y'all are in the classrooms and able to kind of come in and be like, hey, I saw this work. Maybe we could fix it. I thought about your class and I thought about how you were talking about this. And so I've seen that happen plenty of times over the last couple years that I don't think people really talk about because that also develops relationships amongst educators, right? Because then after I did it in my class, whenever I saw Jordan It was, oh my gosh, I did it, but
yeah.
I modified it this way and it really worked for me. And I had high flyers who were even understanding it.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, meeting everywhere. And she was like, that's super cool. I did it differently, but it worked this way.
Yeah.
And so, just being able to have that conversation, I think is really
It is,
important.
and we get to see so much of the genius that's in, because there is. I mean, the best learning we can do is from each other, you know, and
Right.
going into classrooms and seeing that instruction. And then really, like you said, bringing it and then tweaking it to use on your own, like how
Right.
you can make it work for yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And that just keeps pointing back to our partnership principles. Teachers have the last voice. Teachers have the choice.
Right.
They're the ones, they're interacting with their students. They know their students best, and so
Right.
that's a great example.
Right. And know what's best for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thinking about, commentary is a point of focus, sounds like. So then what's one thing that you think you can do that would make the biggest difference? Maybe tweaking that tower idea.
I think it's potentially, I don't know, because I've modeled before. So I thought maybe potentially like, hey, if Mrs. Harms does it, then maybe we can do it this way. And some it clicked and some it didn't. And so I think it's also important to note that, just because it worked with one class doesn't mean it's going to work with the next class.
Right.
And so it's almost like a period by period thing, which I think that a lot of people don't know about education, is that like each period is different and I have to adjust and modify. So I feel like, what might work in second period might not work in seventh, right? With AP Lit. And so what I've found I guess what I'm trying to say is that I feel with them, it's explaining the importance of how, why,
Right.
what, right? Because I've found with students kind of across the board, they just want you to be honest with them. And so oftentimes one of the best strategies that you can do is just tell them the truth. Just tell them the truth. Like, hey, on the AP Lit exam, when you write this essay, this will help you get points.
Yeah.
Right? Like something as simple as that. And then they're like, okay, I'll work on it.
Yes.
Right? And so sometimes I feel even something as simple as that, where like adding that card and being like, hey, like this builds the tower to make it stronger. Right? Like all of this flows together, but it all ultimately should be strong and build off of itself.
Kind of giving them that why. Like, this
Right.
is why you are doing this piece.
Right. Yeah.
Have you had a chance to try the tower with them yet?
Not yet, no. So I'm thinking that potentially what I'm going to do, because we're currently almost to finishing Jane Eyre. So I'm thinking about doing it after we've finished the novel,
Good.
so that we can kind of break down thematics, because I feel like themes are easier to understand, and they can have different pieces of evidence from the text.
Yeah.
And I think that it'll help them kind of formulate that.
Have you had them write a full literary analysis yet?
No.
Okay. So I
Right.
think on it then, that seems like that would be a great way to get them started. Like, this is the expectation, you're doing it. And then, I mean, same thing with those visuals and having the cards, and then they're
Right.
putting that into it. So,
Because also, what I'm thinking about doing is that at the end of Jane Eyre, whenever the book is over, we break down a thematic essay, right? We build the towers, and then we're going to deconstruct the towers by writing it.
Love it.
So it's like we're going to take it literally from over here,
Yep.
and then revise and edit as you go, as you transfer. And then essentially take those probably for like a major grade or something like that. Yeah, so.
I like that.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
And then have you ever done anything like, so after they do this process and they generate that literary analysis, then the students kind of looking at each other's work and then going through with the same colors, maybe highlighting like this is this part,
Yes.
this is commentary, this is evidence.
Right. So I did that last year, and it was super beneficial.
Yeah.
That the same color that's on that note card, someone should be able to tell where that is in your
Yes.
essay.
Yeah.
So not giving them the, but I think what I did last year is that I had them highlight it, like
Yes,
their
on
own
their own.
essay. So it could be potentially more beneficial that their classmates should be able to find it.
Right.
When I print off those essays,
Yeah.
basically, which could be really good. Because then if it's present, then we know that we can start to look for it. And honestly,
Right.
that could save me a lot of grading time.
Yeah.
If we're honest.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
yeah.
and if you're looking
It's-
for commentary too, you really, that's what you're going to be focusing on, because
Right.
you've targeted that as the skill that you want to have your students improve.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I think you would be looking at that, and I know either one of us would be more than willing to sit and
Look through
and
it.
help you.
Absolutely, and just see,
Yeah.
right, and
Yeah.
and see how much is there, and is it directly related to,
Right,
like
'cause
all
as
of those
of-
pieces.
As of right now, I've had them write a partner essay, just because I feel like throwing them into the deep end immediately is not as beneficial to them because they're drowning. So we've done like a partner essay, and then we've done introduction, structure, and like a body paragraph. And so that's kind of where I saw the commentary is almost lacking, which I would put into account, like, hey, I don't have a full-blown essay, so the commentary might come later.
Right.
It's just not right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of having that, like, hindsight's 2020.
Yeah,
You know?
but and having the plan in place, I think, is huge.
Yeah.
And knowing how you're going to move forward with it and what you want to target. That's
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And we know kids are different. Strategies don't work for everyone. Possibly even focusing on one period with this to see if it works.
Right.
But knowing you've had experience and success with the strategy, I think that's a great first step. And then that'll let you know then possibly, okay, how do I make this commentary stronger based on what they're
Right.
they're
What you're
providing.
seeing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
And I think it's also beneficial because, we've been talking about relationships and how those connect. So even my kids that I had last year who would be like, oh, I remember doing this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, cool,
Oh,
great.
yes.
Yes.
And it made sense in my
Absolutely.
brain.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I think that added factor
yeah.
could be
Will help.
interesting to see
Absolutely.
of how do they pick it up really quick? Do they
Yeah.
not? Do they,
Yeah.
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 All right.
Well, good. What can we help do to support you with this now, kind of moving forward?
So I think if you like come across any strategies that help with breaking down commentary
Okay.
and helping with that.
Yeah.
But then also I'm an external processor, so I would benefit if we sat down and I showed you like, hey, this is where the commentary was, this is where it is. Like, I think they actually have improved, or maybe they didn't quite get this concept. We need to revisit it.
Yeah.
Just because I process like that. So,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know just from the previous years that your students will be successful because you do get a read on them, and you are willing to kind of target and shift and move for them. So
Yeah.
I really feel like that this will be a good first step
Yeah.
towards student success, targeting that now so they're successful in the spring.
Right.
Of
Yeah.
course.
Focusing on it now. I think it's awesome.
That's
Yeah.
the hope.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
All right.
I know we appreciate you, appreciate your
Yeah.
time. Like you mentioned, you're a coach, so you've got that going on
Yeah.
as well. So thank you for your time. It was
Yeah.
great having you today.
Yeah. Thank
Thanks,
you for
Lexi.
having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I'm excited about this. That'll be good.
Yeah, I'm excited.
It'll be
It'll be good.
All right. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you next time.